Jaya Radha Madhava Puja Bihari. Jai Vishnu Prabhupada Prabhupada Sudesh Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Anant Koti Vaishnava Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopi Gopinath Shravakun Radha Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Ganga Mai Ki Yamuna Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulsi Devi Ki Shri Hari Ram Sankirtan Ki Kankaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Samaveda Bhaktivinoda Ki Nitai Gaur Premanandi All glories to Simple devotees. All glories to Simple devotees. All glories to Simple devotees. All glories to Shri Guru Angaranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayana Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devam Saraswatam Vyasam Nitya Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhakti Bhavtinashtiki Morsan Srimad Bhagavatam which the very way to find the extension offers next human being. That's a Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam, and by rendering service unto the pure devotees, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as the Godful. All right, so today, my voice holds up. We will be speaking on fourth canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, and we've just started a new chapter. And this chapter is Prithu Maharaj's going back home, back to Godhead. So Kirtan Yoga Prabhu did 1 and 3, and so today we'll do 4. In the previous chapter, we were discussing a lot about how Prithu Maharaj maintains the proper kingdom in his Grihastha ashram, and how he did those duties perfectly by remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead and by helping all of his citizens become Krishna conscious. By speaking to them, and then also the 4 Kumaras came and had this big conversation with Prithu Maharaj in front of all of them. He made sure everyone was engaged in their proper duties, and gave everyone the best chance for going back home, back to Godhead. But now we're going to discuss what happens when Prithu Maharaj is finished with his duties as being king. And so this is why this chapter is titled Prithu Maharaj is going back home, back to Godhead. So, sorry, can't see it. Tatrapyadabhyaniyamo Vyakyanasya susammate Arabhya Ugratapasi Yatasva Vijaye Pura Tatrapya Dyavya Niyamo Vyakyanyasa Susamyate Arabhya Ugratapasi Yatasva Vijaye Pura Tatrapya Niyamo Vyakanasya Susamate Arabhya Ugratapasi Kitasva Vijaye Pura. Alright, you guys try it. Alright, Tetra, there. Api, also. Adabhya, severe. Niyamaha, austerities. Vaikanasya, rules and regulations of retired life. Susamate, perfectly recognized. Arabhya, beginning. Ugra, severe. Like Ugra Nishinga, very fierce in form. Tapasi, austerity. Ita, as much as. Swavijaye, in conquering the world. Pura, formally. Translation. After retiring from family life, Maharaj Prithu strictly followed the regulations of retired life and underwent severe austerities in the forest. He engaged in these activities as seriously as he had formerly engaged in leading the government and conquering everyone. Please repeat. After retiring from family life, Maharaj Prithu strictly followed the rules and regulations of retired life. And underwent severe austerities in the forest. He engaged in these activities as seriously as he had formerly engaged in leading the government and conquering everyone. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. As it is necessary for one to become very active in family life, similarly, after retirement from family life, it is necessary to control the mind and senses. This is possible when one engages himself fully in the devotional service of the Lord. Actually, the whole purpose of the Vedic system, the Vedic social order, is to enable one to ultimately return home back to Godhead. The Grihastha ashram is a sort of concession combining sense gratification with regulative life. It is to enable one to easily retire in the middle of life and engage fully in austerities in order to transcend material sense gratification once and for all. Therefore, in the vanaprastha stage of life, tapasya, or austerity, is strongly recommended. Maharaj Prithu followed all of the rules of vanaprastha life, which is technically known as Vaikanasya ashram. The word Vaikanasya susamate is significant because in vanaprastha life, the regulative principles are also to be strictly followed. In other words, Maharaj Prithu was an ideal character in every sphere of life. Mahajano yena gita supataha. One should follow in the footsteps of great personalities. Thus, by following the exemplary character of Maharaj Prithu, one can become perfect in all respects while living in this life or while retiring from active life. Thus, after giving up this body, one can become liberated and go back to Godhead. All right. I need the blessings of our acharyas for this one. Om Ganatrinanda Shaganajana Shlakaya Chakshara Madhitamina Tasma Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Mano Vishram Savitamina Putale Swayam Pakaramayam Didati Swaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavam Shri Rupam Sagritatam Sahagana Raghunaptam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savaditam Prajana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vidhamsha Hey Krishna Karna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Kapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhikanta Namostate Tapta Kanchana Gorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu State Devi Pranamami Haripriya Panchakalpatrubhisha Kripa Sindhu Bevacha Patitana Bhavnebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasati Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Maharaj Prithu is now retiring. So often when we hear this word, retire, or at least maybe many of you thought about it growing up, this word retire, you thought maybe about your grandparents. And generally when most people retire, this is when they buy that condo down in Florida, South Florida, and they sit on the beach. They take their retirement money, spend it on their grandkids a little bit. Maybe they'll travel around a little bit, eat out at restaurants every single night, gain about 30 to 40 pounds. And basically it's like, okay, now I'm no longer working. Now let me try to use what little bit of life I have to really enjoy, to do all these things I really wanted to do when I was 20 and 30, but couldn't do because I was stuck working a job and having kids. So let me try to do it now. So, often you'll see that with retired people. You notice you go look out at a golf course, you see, 50, 60-year-old guys out there hitting iron. And so, anyway, this is what I always thought retirement life was kind of about, when I was growing up. But the system that Krishna designs in Bhagavad Gita, he explains in the 4th chapter, Chaturmaya Varnashrishtam. So he talks about the 4 orders of life, which we've discussed Prithu Maharaj's Grihastha life extensively in the last chapter. But Krishna has designed this whole system that for the first part of one's life, they will spend time as students. And of course, we do this in the West, like we'll spend time as students, but we're not really being taught anything of spiritual value usually, unless maybe if you go to I don't know, Christian school or something, maybe they teach you something about God there. But for the most part, if you go to public education, they don't teach you these things. So, but the whole system that Krishna designed is that from the early stage of life, we would learn about Krishna consciousness. So we would actually learn about, okay, now you have the human form of life. What is your goal? And so it was very beneficial, when the child is young, because when the child is young, they can pick up all sorts of things very easily. So in this stage of life, you learn about Krishna consciousness. You learn how to be a servant. You learn how to control your senses. And then after that stage, one enters into the grihastha ashram, which is family life. And in this family life, one is making some money. They're having some children. And this can also be beneficial to society because, as we know, we had this big meeting last night. Devotional projects cost money. And in our case, they cost a lot of money. And so really in this Vedic society, and also still today, what you have is it's the grihasthas that are giving the money for building the temples because they're the ones that are making the monies. And also they help by giving spirit souls that are eligible for taking up Krishna consciousness. They give them bodies so that they can actually continue their journey back to Godhead. And so, in that way, and then they'll spend about 25 years or so. And then the system that Krishna has designed is that after the children are grown up, and after most of business affairs and all that are taken care of, one will spend the next portion of their life focused mainly on spiritual matters. So, in this case, Prithu Maharaj is going to the forest with his wife, Archie. But also, what could happen is that the husband and wife travel to various holy places, and they'll go around to different sites, different temples. But mainly, it's a time of life that one specifically spends just for direct focus on Krishna, direct engagement in devotional service. Because in the grihastha ashram, when one is married and one is raising children, you have to deal with so many material things. And of course, we're dovetailing, all these things to the best of our ability. But a special portion of time is set aside just for, directly focusing on Krishna. When you're getting towards the end of life, okay? As Prabhupada was saying, when the hair turns gray, that's our sign that we're getting towards the end of life. So you have this period, which is usually, after 50, that one spends, just hearing about Krishna, serving the devotees, and that becomes one's main focus. So in the past, kings would do this. They would run their kingdom very nicely, and they would train up their successor, which was usually their son. And then when that was done, they would retire, and they would go to the forest, and they would just spend time meditating on Krishna and like this. And it was away from all the distractions that you get when you're in the kingdom and so forth. But now, that's very difficult to do. Because if most of us went to the forest, we probably wouldn't survive very long. There's many animals in the forest, snakes and whatnot, and many mosquitoes. In Kali Yuga, the mosquitoes alone would probably make people give up and go back to the city. So, and then also, Prabhupada makes the point in many of his lectures that, just by going to the forest in this age, it doesn't actually help one because the mind is so disturbed in Kali Yuga that we need some direct engagement in Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada called the forest in Kali Yuga the temple, or we could spread that out a little more broadly, to be somewhere where you're in the association of devotees and you have some fixed service and you're able just to spend your time really absorbed in Krishna, really absorbed in the books, really absorbed in serving the deity, really absorbed in serving the Vaishnavas. And I see that that's one of the things that this Krishna's home we're opening. It's creating that atmosphere, because we have many people that are coming toward the end of their life and they need assistance, but they also need to be with devotees, hearing the holy name, hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing the Bhagavad Gita, and all these things, so that they can fix their mind on Krishna and prepare for this final stage of life. The whole point of human life really is to go back to Godhead. So Krishna had originally set up this system to help us, but he also gives us free will. So within time, we've taken it and we've distorted it. It's been, turned upside down. So now you really don't see people doing this anymore. But we can take the essence of what's been given here in Bhagavatam and understand that there's an urgency here. There's an urgency to become Krishna conscious. So we understand that all these ashrams actually mean shelter. These ashrams are meant to give us some shelter and help us make advancement. So the Vanaprastha ashram, what it's doing is it's giving one shelter, and it's helping one be fully focused on Krishna consciousness. So in our Shastras, as I mentioned before in previous classes, the Bhagavatam gives us examples of what to do and what not to do. And can anyone think of someone in the Shastras besides Prithvi Maharaj who followed this process also nicely? She, whatever, they went through the Grihastha ashram and then the Vanaprastha ashram and then went back to Godhead. Has anyone seen a good example of this besides Prithvi? Yes. The Pandavas. Yudhishthira. And that's interesting because it's clear that Yudhishthira had so much opulence, right? And then when they found out that Krishna had left the planet, and actually they were told previously, you can stay here as long as Krishna's on the planet. And so they did that. But as soon as they found out Krishna left the planet, immediately Yudhishthira did all the yajnas and everything for entering the renounced order of life. And of course, we don't have all these yajnas now, but it was just like, it was shocking. It's like you turn the page in the first canto and Yudhishthira's just taking off all his clothes, putting on, put on tree bark, And of course, now we put on very simple clothes, things like this. He stopped really interacting with people. And then his brothers, they just kind of all did the same, and they just left. They were like, okay, time for the next thing. And they weren't thinking of, okay, who's going to take care of my grandkids? Who's gonna pay my mortgage? Like many people do today. There's all these excuses now that we have in this age. We think, oh, how are these people going to live without me? But no, they understood, okay, we've done what we could do. We ran the kingdom like we should. And also they were cultivating this Krishna consciousness. Of course, they were pure devotees. But if you read the story of the Pandavas, they were Krishna conscious all throughout their life. So when it was time for them to give these things up, they were able just to easily let it go because that focus was on Krishna. What's another example?
Another point, they said that they didn't even think about Draupadi. She was like a center of their lives for so long, and then this happened, they just didn't push them along, but they just,
Oh yeah, that's another thing. Draupadi was so beautiful, right? And then like Karna and Duryodhana, all of them wanted her as their wife, and they left her. And then, but it says in Bhagavatam that Draupadi and Subhadra, they got the same destination. So, they also, but the whole point is that they would just let go of this attachment. And also, one of the things too about this story before we go on is I found it really interesting in the Mahabharata. It's describing their journey, after they retire. And Arjuna, he has his arrows with him, and at one point he just lets them go. His like Gandiva bow and everything. And Arjuna had, Arjuna took his Gandiva bow very seriously, so seriously to the point that if anybody told him to put it down, he like took a vow to like kill them or something. So, and at one point he just lays all that down. So this is what happens when one is in Krishna consciousness. One is able to let go of, what's unnecessary for our advancement or for our service in Krishna. At some point, we might need it, but at some point, we might have to let it go. So being fixed in Krishna consciousness helps us let this go. So anyone else? Good example? We read it. King Rishabdev. Yeah, very good. You had something?
I was just thinking of Dhruva's father.
Dhruva's father? Oh, Uttanapad. Yeah, Uttanapad. Karnama Muni. Anga. Another one. Anga is a specific story because when Anga saw he couldn't do anything else with Dana, he tried, but when he saw it was a hopeless cause, he renounced his kingdom. And so we have these good examples, but then we also have examples of what shouldn't be done. Anyone think of any examples of what shouldn't be done? Anyone who?
Well, when Rishabdev went off into the forest, the initiation attached, reattached.
Bharat Maharaj. The Bharat, yeah. Actually, yeah, no, that one I didn't think of, but that's another interesting one. Bharat Maharaj, he went to the forest, but he got reattached. So that's another point here, that when one does retire, one needs to make sure that they don't take on more than what they can do. One of the things about Bharat Maharaj is that he went to the forest alone. He didn't have any association, anyone with him to help him with his sadhana. And so when you're alone, what happens is that you're with your mind, which is not a very good guru. And the mind is always wanting to accept and reject things. So Bharat Maharaj slowly starts to become attached to this deer. And then he starts to give up his sadhana. Then he starts to give up his practice. So it was like, then what was the point of going to the forest? So in this age of Kali Yuga, Bharat Maharaj's story is a good example for us, because it's an example of how we need to stay in the association of devotees. We need to stay with people that can inspire us. But also, we don't want to just stay in a situation that we're in just because, this is very comfortable and I'm very important here. And like in the example of Dhritarashtra, who, even after, he lost the battle, he was on the other side. And even after all of his sons died, he was sitting in the house of Yudhishthira. And he was thinking, I'm very important here. People need me. But yet his body was aging. And Vidura comes. And Vidura, his brother, Vidura says, what are you doing here? Your teeth are falling out. Your liver is failing. Your skin is all wrinkly. You're blind. Your faculties are giving up on you. And yet you're sitting here in the house of your enemy, basically, who's people who you tried to kill, and you're eating remnants from Bhima. And so if you read the Mahabharata, that Dhritarashtra and Bhima, they had this, they really, really were at odds with each other, because Bhima had vowed to kill all of Dhritarashtra's sons after Draupadi was insulted. And so, but Dhritarashtra throughout his life, instead of cultivating Krishna consciousness, what he was doing was he was in anxiety for Duryodhana. He was cultivating attachment for his son Duryodhana. So when Duryodhana was very young, he tried to kill his cousins in so many ways. And Dhritarashtra, didn't really punish him. Dhritarashtra was just saying, "Oh, well, it's fate. What can fate? What can we do? This is destiny's arrangement." And people would go to Dhritarashtra and they would tell Dhritarashtra, "No, you should punish your son. You should tell him that he shouldn't be doing these things." And Dhritarashtra was like, "Oh, I can't really do anything," even though he was the king and he could do something. So since he was cultivating attachment to his son throughout his life, and cultivating further attachment to his kingdom, even at the end of his life, he wasn't able to give it up. He was staying in the home of his enemy, which was really, really bad for someone of a Kshatriya. That just something that they didn't do. They were very honorable people. And so Vidura comes, and Vidura is telling him, you should give this up. And Dhritarashtra is thinking like, no, I'm very important here because Yudhisthira is coming to me every day and he's paying his obeisances to me. And he's telling you're at the end of your life and you should go to the forest. And because Dhritarashtra got the mercy of Vidura, who's a great devotee of the Lord, he was able to convince him to go to the forest. And of course, like I said, in this age, we can't do this, but in the previous ages, you could. And so Dhritarashtra did go to the forest, and he did practice austerities, and eventually it was described as a personal liberation. He was able to cut it off. But this also, pastime in a way, glorifies Vidura, because Vidura, he didn't have to come back. Vidura he was insulted. And due to this insult, he left the kingdom. But because Vidura was Dhritarashtra's brother, and he had affection for him, he wanted to go back and he wanted to try to help him. And so he went back and he convinced him, give all this up, go to the forest, practice austerities. And so Dhritarashtra did this. And then it also shows that we need the mercy of devotees in our life. Because devotees, they're the ones that give us the spiritual knowledge, they're the ones that inspire us. So we need to have good association around us. Another example is Puranjana. In the Bhagavatam, Puranjana, he was also a king, but he was doing these animal sacrifices for the karmakanda process. And of course, as we've mentioned in previous classes, this karmakanda process, you do these sacrifices and you can get different types of enjoyment from it. But Puranjana, Prachini Bharshan, I think it's. And Narada Muni is coming to him and telling him, you don't need to be doing this. And these animals are waiting to come and take you, when you leave your body. So Narada Muni comes and gives him his mercy. And then also Puranjana, though, he is an example of someone who is overly attached in his kingdom. He becomes very attached to his wife, very attached to his family. And even though this is allegory that Narada Muni is telling, it describes what happens when one becomes too overly attached in material life. And then one has to take another body. So as we know with the story of King Puranjana, he had to take another body and he had to become a woman in his next life. So it's very important to stay on the path of Krishna consciousness. Even just a little bit of advancement can protect one, even if one deviates a little bit, as we see in the story of Ajamil. He had very good training throughout his life, but he had one slip up where he became attached to this prostitute. And then he kind of forgot Krishna consciousness and he was totally engaging in material life. But at the end of his life, he was able to chant the holy name of Narayan, and that saved him. And then he got a second chance, and then he fully focused on Krishna and went back to Godhead. But So these are kind of examples. Bhagavatam's telling us, okay, these are good examples. Karma Muni, Maharaj Prithu, Anga, Yudhishthira, people who focused on Krishna throughout their life and all their ashrams, and then at the end they didn't maintain unnecessary attachment. They understood, okay, now my life is going to expire. Just let me set things up in the best way so that I can remember Krishna at the end of life. Because this human life, it's described that it's actually very rare. Prahlad Maharaj explains this to his classmates in the 7th canto, that this human life is temporary, like any form of life. But the one thing about this human life is that one can actually understand who Krishna is, and one can revive their relationship with Krishna. So Krishna is so kind to us that he sets up a system in which we can go back to him at the end of life. We start to gradually revive our relationship with him. But like I said earlier, we pervert this system. We distorted this system with our own free will. And now you see that people tend to think, okay, that the human life is just to be as materially comfortable as possible. But what we can do from the Bhagavatam, even though we don't have this Varnashram system set up, we can take the essence of it. And so throughout our life, hold on 1 second. I'm getting the warning that my human life is temporary with this disease. This is not fun. So throughout our life, no matter what ashram we're in, Prabhupada has given us these very nice books. We can hear about Krishna. And the sweet thing about this is that Prabhupada has given us these purports so that we can understand it. Originally, all these Vedas, all of Krishna's pastimes, it was all in Sanskrit, so it was really inaccessible to us, especially here in the West, because we don't learn Sanskrit, we don't study it. The original meaning of the word malecha was a person who didn't know Sanskrit. So it wasn't just like somebody born in the West. So we're actually very fortunate that Prabhupada's come and he's given us these pastimes. And he's given us the philosophy with the pastimes. And so that we can hear about these things. And so that we know what to expect. So here we hear that Prithu Maharaj, he's reached the point of his life where his time of being a king is finished. And it's time for him to retire. So we can take that as a warning for all of us too. Eventually this time is going to come for us as well. We're going to get older. The body's going to start to break down. So we need to set aside time for hearing about Krishna, for chanting Krishna's names, for getting some fixed service. And also, this is one of the reasons why I'm mentioning this. This is one of the reasons why it's recommended that grihastas now, they have some fixed service in the temple. Because having some fixed service, it helps one remember Krishna. Because you have so many distractions, you have kids to raise, and of course the kids are little Vaishnavas and they're cute, but you don't always realize that at every second of your life, especially when you got 3 kids and they all want something different to eat, and then you cook it, and none of them like what you cooked because you breathed on it or you looked at it the wrong way, and then you're stressed out because you spent 3 hours cooking. And then, they get sick at night, and then you're up all night at them. So you have so many distractions when you're doing this type of service that it's hard to fully focus on Krishna. So it's actually recommended by many gurus that the grihastas, if they can, they have some service in the temple that they can come do, whether it's deity seva, whether you're cooking the Sunday feast or whatever. so that you come and that you spend time with the devotees, you spend time with Krishna, so that you're reminded again, okay, what is my actual goal? Let me get recentered here on my purpose. And then when the kids grow up, because you've spent that time trying to remember Krishna, then you're able to kind of say, okay, now you're grown up. Now, live your life, do what you have to do, and you're able to retire. Now we see most people, they think of some excuse not to do that. I've seen it sometimes, even with devotees, they'll think, okay, so should we retire now? How about we go to the Dhams? How about we go travel? How about we go, take up some service here? Oh, wait, we can't. Our son's not married yet. And then the son gets married. Oh, wait, we can't. We're going to have kids. Oh, wait, we can't. We have grandkids. Oh, wait, our kids have to move back in with us. If you wait, you'll always have an excuse. You'll always have a reason to hold on. But what really happens at the end of life? You know what happens? You're lying there in your deathbed while your family's kind of sad, but then half of them are fighting over who's going to take your stuff. I've seen it in so many cases. It's always the same thing. Even though they love you, even though they might love that family member dearly, and the family member loves them, the one in the bed is thinking, oh, who's going to take care of this and who's going to take care of that? But the kids, they're sitting here thinking, okay, what of yours am I going to take? I see it with my family. They're already fighting over who's going to take certain people's stuff. So, it happens. And so we have to kind of realize where we are in the game. Like Nakuda and I were talking last night. She was telling me about this lady that was 70 years old and divorcing her husband because she wanted to go find herself. And we're like, you're going to get divorced because you want to go find yourself. And then I was telling her about my great grandmother before she passed away at 90 years old, how she was wanting to renovate her home. But as I mentioned before, it's because the soul, naturally we're eternally useful. But so we forget that one day our body is going to expire because death is not natural for us. But it is going to expire. And whatever consciousness that we've cultivated throughout our life, a lot of people think, oh, it's what I think about at the moment of death. But really what you think about at the moment of death is what you cultivated throughout your life. So if you cultivated Krishna, at the time of death, you're going to think of Krishna. So that's actually the what's helpful about this Vanaprastha stage is that it's a time that you just really go kind of hardcore into Krishna consciousness, focusing Krishna, and you're done with your material affairs. So that it gives you the best opportunity. So at the time of life, that you can think of Krishna at that moment. And it might not be so easy. Even I've noticed, just having this horrible migraine over the past 2 or 3 days, chanting is difficult. Reading, studying is difficult. And usually I'm very, fixed with these things. Preparing for class is difficult, all these things. So the time of death, when your senses, they start to give up on you. And by Krishna's mercy, I've had small experiences of this. It's like if our attachment's not to Krishna, really, it's no telling what's going to happen to us, what birth we're going to take. So Prabhupada is explaining here what Prithu Maharaj is doing. And for us, we shouldn't see this as, oh, that was back then. I can't do that now. But we should take the essence of this and think, okay, if we're young, think, all right, I've got maybe so much time that I need to set aside some time towards the end of my life to focus on Krishna. Or if we're getting a little bit older, we should start to think, okay, how can I arrange things in such a way that I can focus more on Krishna, and that I can around things I've been just engaged in spiritual life. So don't get caught up in all these details, but take the essence of it and understand that this ashram here, it's meant to refocus on us on what the purpose of life is. So my throat and voice is about to give out, as well as the rest of my body. So I'm going to have to stop here. Speaking of our first ashram, we have our dear Suresh Prabhu. You can see you were spending the last years of your life in the Association of Devotees. You see what? So this is a very good example of what one can do in modern day. He's here. He's in the temple doing seva. Yes, Lalita Priya.
I was just wondering if you had any examples from Sastra, sort of about like women who were vanaprastha. What did they do? What did they do after their husbands left? They just stayed home and their sons took care of them, or was there women that also went and really focused on service to Krishna and stuff?
Yeah, there are a couple examples. I mean, we haven't gotten to it yet, but Archie is going with Prithu to the forest. Gandhari also went with Dhritarashtra to the forest, and they both did austerities, and they both all went back to Godhead. In certain cases, the woman might stay home, like in the case of Devahuti. Mm-hmm. She stayed with her son Kapila, and he gave her instruction. Let me think. I think Kunti also stayed back.
She went to the forest.
Oh, yeah, that's right. She went to the forest with Dhritarashtra and Gandhari. So,
Also the Banu.
I thought she went with, okay. Yeah, maybe you're right.
Yeah.
And then,
that was her sons taking care of.
those are sons taking care. Yeah, so for the woman, it depends, but the same principle is there, that they spend their time focusing on Krishna, and they also kind of wrap up their affairs. It's not like they're raising kids at 70, 80 years old. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess one thing that I always, not always, but it just occurred to me is can it be harder for the woman, because oftentimes they're very attached to their sons in particular, and so specifically in those cases where they're staying home and they're being taken care of by their adult son, couldn't that make it more difficult for them to be detached?
It might be.
Yeah.
Depending on, that could be the case. I mean, there is one prayer by Kunti Devi in which she's praying to Krishna to sever her material attachment to her kinsman,
Yeah.
So that also is there. And it could be that the woman feels very attached to her sons. But at the same time, that's why it's important to cultivate Krishna consciousness throughout the life. Because, the material attachment can be there. But eventually we want to sever this idea that you're my son, you're my daughter, whatever, and love them on the basis of spirit and soul.
Yes.
And so that could be there, which is why, and it could be there for anybody, which is why it's important to cultivate this knowledge. Yeah. But it's hard. Definitely. That's why Prabhupada said that the love of the mother is the purest love in the material, almost as close to the purest love in the material world. Yeah, because it's unconditional. So I mean, I have seen this with women. Like they get very attached to their son. Yeah. No, I want to make sure my son goes to the college, and then I want to make sure he gets married to this type of girl. But then also you can see the father's attachment to the daughter too. Oh, I want to make sure. Yeah. So I mean, it's there, but at the same time, That's why there are certain regulations for Grihastha life and then certain regulations for Vanaprastha life. And that's why this hearing is here, so that we're reminded, okay, this isn't your all in all, this isn't everything. This is going to end at a certain point.
I think
Yeah. Is that satisfying? All right. Is there anything else? Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
About women going to the forest alone, as one who has. And when you mentioned it, I was Googling Alaskan Ishkan. They do have
Yeah.
a temple up there. And there are places to go in Alaska that are, that's where I'm from. And, but I caution women, because a lot of unholy, unscrupulous people would like to occupy our holy places, if you know what I mean. And we kind of need this protection from the guys or, from holy people, because otherwise we can get into a lot of trouble. And I have gotten into a lot of trouble feeling kind of androgynous or spiritual, forgetting that I am a vulnerable woman, no matter how powerful I might feel, and then going off by myself into places that maybe we need to come under protection. So I'm just saying it is a wonderful thing to go off to the woods and to just meditate and find yourself and divorce your husband and go find yourself, But there's a little bit of a problem with that. And even though we women would love more freedom, I think it is just the place we're at. Just my thought.
What you're mentioning is, Prabhupada had made this statement once that a 16-year-old boy can travel all over the world and not face the same dangers that a 16-year-old woman will if she travels alone. And I've experienced it personally, so I know, like just traveling in India, I definitely had to be so much more cautious than like what the guys had to be. So yeah, but it's also to make the point, I don't know if I would have made it clear or not, but in these times when the women did go to the forest, they generally didn't go by themselves. They had, their husband with them, or so they generally, they weren't alone. The woman is protected in every stage of life, and they're so that they can easily make spiritual advancement. I did not look over here. Did you guys have something? Sorry. Okay, I just want to make sure I wasn't ignoring you. All right. Okay. Well, I think they might be bringing out breakfast, so I probably should wrap up here. Thank you for coming and hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. Go through Srimad Bhagavatam ki.
you want to hold it.